The fluorescent lights of Innovatech's conference room seemed especially harsh that morning as I stood before the executive board, watching 3 years of my life being torn apart by Richard Maxwell, our Senior VP of Research and Development. As you can see, Richard said, clicking through my presentation slides with barely concealed disdain, Dr. Elena Martinez's quantum encryption project has produced nothing but expenses and delays. $2 million wasted on what was supposed to be our next breakthrough product. I kept my face neutral, though my hands trembled slightly behind my back. The 12 members of the executive board stared at me with a mix of disappointment and judgment. These were people I'd worked with for 5 years, who had once believed in my vision. Now they were buying into Richard's carefully crafted narrative of my failure. The original timeline promised a working prototype within 18 months, Richard continued, his voice dripping with false concern. Yet here we are, 3 years later, with nothing to show but complicated theories and failed tests. That wasn't true, and Richard knew it. The project had succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. He just didn't know exactly how successful it had been. I glanced at my watch, 9:45 a.m. The patent office opened at 10 o'clock a.m. Perfect timing. Dr. Martinez, CEO Margaret Chen spoke up, her expression stern. Do you have anything to say in your defense? I straightened my spine, remembering the moment 3 years ago when I first pitched this project. I had been so naive then, so trusting. I believed that innovation and hard work would always be rewarded, that corporate politics couldn't touch pure scientific achievement. I'd learned better since then. Actually, Mrs. Chen, I do have something to say. I opened my laptop, typing quickly. But first, I think we should wait for an important email that should be arriving any minute now. Richard's smirk faltered slightly. We don't have time for theatrics, Elena. This meeting is about your failure to deliver. 3 years ago, I cut in, my voice steady. When I first proposed this project, you called it, and I quote, a pipe dream better suited for science fiction than a serious tech company. Do you remember that, Richard? He shifted uncomfortably. The point, I continued, is that you then spent 6 months trying to kill the project. When that failed, you suddenly became its biggest supporter. Funny how that happened right after my first successful test, isn't it? The board members exchanged glances. They knew Richard's reputation for claiming credit for successful projects, but he'd always been too clever to leave evidence. Until now. My laptop chimed. Right on schedule. Ah, perfect timing, I said, turning my screen toward the board. This email is from the U.S. Patent Office, confirming the registration of patent No. US 10,547,832 B2. Quantum encryption method and system for secure data transmission. I paused, letting that sink in. Filed 18 months ago under my private company, Martinez Quantum Solutions. The color drained from Richard's face. You can't do that. Any innovations developed here belong to Innovatech. It's in your contract. I smiled, pulling out a thick folder. Actually, Richard, let's talk about contracts. Specifically, the one you modified after realizing this project might succeed. I distributed copies to each board member. You see, Richard got a bit sloppy in his excitement. When he altered my original contract to try to claim full ownership of my research, he didn't realize I'd already documented everything. Every original design, every test result, every modification, all legally registered under my private company before he made his move. CEO Chen was already flipping through the documents, her expression darkening. Richard, is this true? It's a trick, he sputtered, but his face had gone pale. She's trying to steal company property. Page 3, I interrupted calmly. That's a copy of my original contract showing the intellectual property clause Richard altered. Page 4 shows the digital forensics report proving when the changes were made. Page 5 contains emails between Richard and various patent attorneys from 8 months ago, discussing how to claim ownership of my work. The room had gone deathly quiet. I checked my watch again. 10:15 a.m. By now, our competitors have received official notice that the quantum encryption technology they've been trying to reproduce is protected by my patents. The same technology that Richard here was planning to announce as his own breakthrough at next week's tech conference. Richard lunged for my laptop, but security was faster. They'd been quietly summoned by CEO Chen while I was talking. Take Mr. Maxwell to his office, Chen ordered. He is to be supervised while collecting his personal belongings. As Richard was led away, still protesting, Chen turned to me. Dr. Martinez, I believe we need to have a private conversation about the future of quantum encryption at Innovatech. Perhaps over lunch. I nodded, gathering my materials. I'd like that, Mrs. Chen. I have some ideas about restructuring the R&D department that I think you'll find interesting. As I packed up my laptop, I caught sight of my reflection in the conference room's glass wall. I looked different somehow, stronger, more confident. The nervous researcher who had started this project 3 years ago was gone, replaced by someone who had learned to play the game better than those who had tried to exploit her. Walking back to my office, I passed the lab where I'd spent countless nights working on my failed project. The team was there, pretending to work while sneaking glances at me. They'd known something was coming. I'd made sure my most trusted colleagues were prepared. But they hadn't known exactly what. Team meeting in 5 minutes, I announced, unable to hide my smile. We have some exciting changes to discuss. My phone buzzed. A message from my patent attorney. Second filing confirmed. Subsidiary applications all clear. Congratulations, Dr. Martinez. I sat down at my desk, looking at the framed photo of my father, a small-time inventor who died believing his ideas would never be recognized. This one's for you, Dad, I whispered. The real work was about to begin, but first, there was one more thing to do. I opened my drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope, my resignation letter, prepared months ago. I wouldn't need it now. Instead, I took out a lighter and watched it burn, thinking about the meeting I'd have with CEO Chen over lunch. Sometimes the best revenge isn't leaving. Sometimes it's staying and rebuilding something better from the ashes of what others tried to destroy. My computer chimed again. An email from Richard's secretary, marked urgent. Subject line, please don't do this. I deleted it without reading it. The time for pleading was long past. Now it was time for transformation, not just of Innovatech's R&D department, but of the entire industry. Because what Richard never understood was that my quantum encryption project wasn't just about securing data. It was about changing how we think about information itself. The next few weeks at Innovatech were a masterclass in corporate transformation. Lunch with CEO Chen had lasted 3 hours, during which I laid out my vision, not just for the quantum encryption technology, but for rebuilding the company's entire research division from the ground up. The problem isn't just Richard, I explained, spreading out detailed organizational charts. It's the culture he created. Innovation doesn't thrive in an environment of fear and credit stealing. Margaret Chen, usually known for her poker face, couldn't hide her interest as I outlined my proposals. By the time dessert arrived, I had been promoted to Executive Vice President of Innovation and Research, with a mandate to implement sweeping changes. But transformation isn't easy, especially when you're dismantling decades of toxic corporate culture. The morning after Richard's departure, I walked into my new office, his old one, and found his loyal supporters waiting for me. James Davidson, Richard's former deputy, acted as their spokesman. We just want to understand, he said, arms crossed, how someone who couldn't deliver a working prototype somehow ended up in charge. I smiled, remembering all the times these same people had undermined my work, parroting Richard's doubts. Walking to the wall safe, already recoded to my biometrics, I pulled out a slim black device about the size of a smartphone. "Hearing this prototype, James?" I set it on the desk. "The one Richard told you didn't exist?" His eyes widened. Everyone in tech knew what a quantum encryption module should look like. They'd been theorized for years. This was exactly it, but smaller, sleeker, and actually working. But the tests, the failures, were carefully documented fabrications, I explained. Richard was so busy trying to steal credit, he never realized the failed tests were a smokescreen. The real development happened in my private lab, funded by the patents I'd already secured. Why? Another researcher asked. Why go through all that? Because Richard taught me something valuable. In this industry, it's not enough to be brilliant. You have to be strategic. I turned on the prototype, letting them watch as it effortlessly encrypted and decrypted test data. Now you all have a choice. You can either join me in building something revolutionary or you can find new jobs. But first, you'll need to sign updated NDAs. I slid a stack of documents across the desk. One by one, they signed. Not out of loyalty, not yet, but out of recognition that the power dynamics had shifted. That would do for now. Loyalty could be earned later. The real work began the following week. I assembled a new core team, promoting overlooked talents from within the company and recruiting fresh perspectives from outside. Sarah Chin, a brilliant cryptographer Richard had repeatedly passed over for promotion, became my technical director. Tom Nguyen, whose innovative proposals had been repeatedly shelved, took charge of application development. But my masterstroke came from an unexpected quarter. Dr. Martinez, my assistant, poked her head in one afternoon. "There's a Kelly Maxwell here to see you. She says it's important." I recognized the name immediately. Richard's daughter, a recent MIT graduate. I'd met her at company events, seen the way Richard dismissed her technical insights despite her obvious brilliance, sent her in. Kelly entered cautiously, clutching a laptop. "Dr. Martinez, I know this might seem strange, but I've been working on an application of your quantum encryption technology for medical data systems. I think you should see this." For the next hour, she walked me through her ideas. They were innovative, elegant, and exactly what the healthcare industry needed. When she finished, I had only one question. "When can you start?" Her eyes widened. "You're offering me a job, even after what my father—" "I judge people by their own merits, Kelly, something your father never learned to do." She joined the team the next day. Richard's reaction when he learned his daughter was now working for me was satisfying but ultimately irrelevant. We had bigger things to focus on. The next 6 months were a blur of activity. We rolled up a quantum encryption system to critical acclaim, securing contracts with major healthcare providers, financial institutions, and government agencies. The stock price soared. More importantly, the culture in R&D transformed. Gone were the days of cutthroat competition and stolen credit. I instituted a new policy. All patents would be shared between the company and the inventors, with generous royalty agreements. Innovation flourished. Ideas that had been hidden away for fear of theft now came to light. 1 year after that fateful board meeting, I stood on stage at the Global Tech Summit, the same conference where Richard had planned to steal credit for my work. But instead of presenting just one innovation, I was showcasing an entire portfolio of breakthroughs from my transformed department. The future of technology, I told the packed auditorium, isn't about individual genius. It's about creating environments where innovation can thrive, where brilliant minds can collaborate without fear. In the front row, I saw Margaret Chen nodding in approval. Our market cap had tripled under the new approach. More importantly, Innovatech had become known as the place where serious innovators wanted to work. After the presentation, a young researcher approached me, clutching a notebook. "Dr. Martinez, your story, it's inspired so many of us. But I have to ask, weren't you afraid? Taking on someone so powerful in the company?" I thought about that moment in the boardroom, about the years of careful planning that had led to it. "Fear isn't always a warning," I told her. "Sometimes it's a sign that you're about to do something important." Later that evening, I returned to my office to find an unexpected email. It was from Richard, sent from his new position at a much smaller company. The subject line read, "You won." I deleted it without reading it, just like all his other attempts at communication over the past year. This had never been about winning or losing. It had been about building something that would last. On my desk, next to the latest prototype of our quantum encryption module, sat a framed magazine cover. Innovatech's Research Revolution. How Elena Martinez Changed the Game. But it wasn't the headline that caught my eye. It was the small photo in the corner, showing our diverse research team collaborating on new projects. That was the real victory, not the patents, not the profits, but the creation of a place where innovation could flourish without fear, where the next generation of brilliant minds could build their dreams without looking over their shoulders. My phone buzzed. Kelly Maxwell, sending me the latest test results from our new medical privacy system. Another breakthrough, her message read. "Dad always said quantum encryption in healthcare was impossible. Guess he was wrong about that too." I smiled, remembering Richard's dismissive remarks about pipe dreams and science fiction. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something so magnificent that their attempts to stop you become nothing more than footnotes in your success story. The quantum encryption project had started as my defense against corporate theft. It had evolved into something far more important, a catalyst for change in an industry desperate for transformation. As I gathered my things to leave for the day, I passed the wall of patents in our R&D lobby, now displaying not just my original quantum encryption patent, but dozens of others, each bearing the names of their actual inventors alongside the company's. A group of interns was studying them, pointing excitedly at the technical diagrams. "Dr. Martinez," one called out, "we were just reading about your first patent. How did you know it would work? That you could really change things?" I paused, thinking about that nervous researcher from 3 years ago, working late into the night, documenting everything, preparing for a battle she wasn't even sure she could win. "I didn't know," I admitted. "I just knew I had to try." Sometimes that's enough, knowing that the attempt itself matters, that standing up for what's right is important, even if you're not sure of the outcome. They nodded, turning back to their discussion of quantum mechanics and encryption protocols. I continued to my car, smiling as I heard their excited chatter fade behind me. The future of innovation was in good hands. That night, as I reviewed proposals for our next generation of security systems, I thought about how far we'd come. Richard had tried to steal a piece of technology, never understanding that the real value wasn't in the patent itself. It was in the mind that created it, in the environment that nurtured it, in the team that helped it grow. He had taught me an invaluable lesson. True innovation isn't just about protecting your ideas. It's about creating spaces where new ideas can flourish, where brilliance isn't threatened but celebrated, where the next generation can build on your work without fear. That was the real quantum leap, not in encryption, but in how we think about innovation itself. And that was a patent that could never be stolen.